Hello, I'm Dylan.
And I'm Keon.
And this is Zenith, that podcast with googly eyes, because this week we watched Voice from the Past.
Written by Roger Parks.
Directed by George Spenton Foster.
And aired on March 13th, 1979. Robert Parks? Robert Parks? It's probably Parks.
Parks, I think.
Has an E somewhere in there.
Parks.
Yeah,
that's what
Parks.
I would say. For his first script for the show, I think.
Right.
Which makes him the fifth.
Well, we got Terry Nation, Chris Boucher.
Robert Holmes. And Alan Pryor.
Alan Pryor, so fifth.
Fifth.
And we almost got Pip and Jane Baker, but...
Oh, thank God for that.
Well, if you followed Making Blake 7 on Twitter recently, what he's doing now actually is... I don't know if he's done it yet, but he said he's going to...
He recreated the script, and he's done it already.
Oh, he's
done most of it, I think.
Right.
I think he still has to finish it. At least by the time we were recording this, he's done most of it. And I looked at
by the time this goes out, it'll probably be done.
And I looked at some of them, and I was like, yeah, this is probably better than the actual episode would have been. Kind of like that time Flight Through Entirety recorded that discarded Eric Sayward version of the end of Trial of a Time Lord, and it was way better than it would have ever been on TV.
I don't remember that. I mean, that was... Oh, no, it wasn't before I started following them. I don't consistently listen to them, though, honestly. So Voice from the Past.
Our first non-one-word title since what? Pressure Point?
Yeah, Pressure Point, which wasn't that long ago, but still, I mean, Voice from the Past sticks out more than Pressure Point.
Yeah, because it's 4 words, it's an actual phrase. So the story begins... The story begins with the most hilarious sitcom-y open to Blake 7 in existence, because they're all in this room doing yoga.
Yeah, right, they're exercising.
Yoga.
Apparently the Liberator has an exercise room.
They call it the rest room later, which if you know anything about America, that's very confusing, because in America you call the bathroom the restroom.
Right.
So that was kind of confusing. But not really confusing, because I knew what they were referring to.
Yeah, no, it wasn't that confusing.
But out of context, it's confusing.
Sure, maybe if you're just reading the script of this instead of watching the episode itself, it's confusing. Anyway, they're all in... not all. Half of them are in poses, It looks like Blake and Callie are sort of taking this... Callie's taking it seriously. Blake is taking it somewhat seriously, it looks like. Avon is sort of just curled up, looks like he's waiting for it to end.
Avon's just playing along.
Jenna is just literally laying down, looking like she wishes it was already over.
They're in spandex. Classic 80s exercise gear, except it's 79, so still a year early. Villa is noticeably absent in this scene. Wonder how Villa got picked to be on navigation duty. Sure, he really wanted that job. I'm sure if I was Jenna, I'd be fighting for that job just based on how apathetic she was about these exercises.
I just thought Villa wanted to deal with his own nerves in his own way, preferably with a little bit of soma.
Yeah, well, it doesn't look like he's drunk or anything.
Yeah, I don't think he's getting any. I mean, if Callie's in charge of that supply, I don't think he's getting any.
I don't think he's getting any, period,
Soma.
If you know what I mean.
Yeah, I needed to add that last word to that sentence for it not to be... Yeah, anyway. So,
all of a sudden, Blake just stands up, walks to the bridge.
Well, doesn't he have a mini attack?
Sort of. He has some sort of breakdown that makes Avon and Callie and Jenna kind of sit up and go, wait, what?
I think as an audience, we get the ringing tone that's in Blake's head.
So, he just goes, can you hear that? And they're like, no. And he's like, that noise. And they're like, what noise? And he's like, that one that's in my head that's been there for a week.
And then he goes off, so what would this be? I know there's a difference in movies and TV between diegetic sound and non-diegetic, and I think diegetic is what's in the story, sounds that characters can hear in the story.
It's like doors closing and footsteps.
Right. Most sound effects, I think, are classified as diegetic. Mm-hmm. But this is a weird one because only Blake... I guess this is still technically diegetic. It's just a sound that's in Blake's head that we can hear as well.
Yeah, I think that would make it diegetic.
I mean, it's also a sound that we find out later is being signaled to him.
Right,
so yeah, it's definitely diegetic here, I think.
Yeah, so Blake just walks into the bridge, goes, Zen, manual control, punches in a thing, and then goes, Zen, automatic control, and then just leaves. And
Villa asks him a couple questions, but he just ignores Villa.
Well, because Villa's like, hey, I'm really excited for Del 10. I've been looking up on it. Looks like it's going to be real nice and relaxing and be able to get a lot of, what there. And Blake's
rest and relax. Well, rest and relaxation. I mean, that's what they're going there for, basically.
Yeah, but Villa's there because he wants those X particles or whatever. I mean, the main reason they're actually going for there is for those special particles that are supposed to help you rest and relax.
Right. Yeah, I forgot about that, actually.
And Villa really wants those particles. Everybody else just wants some time off from fighting the Federation, but Villa is...
There's probably some narcotic effect related to like this, right? So
yeah. And Blake's just ignoring Villa, and then Villa does the snarky, "Oh, yes, Villa, I'd love to go to Del 10. Yes, Villa, that sounds like a great idea."
But he asks Zen how much longer it's going to take to get to Del 10. And Zen's like, "Our course to Del 10 has been altered, dude." Except not like that at all.
Man, I wish Zen sounded like that. Yo, dude, you're not going to Del 10 anymore. You're actually going to Asteroid PK118.
Oh, we're not going to Del 10 anymore.
If it just sounded like HAL 9000, "I'm sorry, Villa. You're not going to Del 10 anymore.
I can't take you to Del 10.
I can't take you to Del 10, Villa." Why not? Because we're going to Asteroid PK118, Villa.
I watched this movie recently, and I forget what it was called.
2001: A Space Odyssey.
It wasn't 2001: A Space Odyssey, but it was very similar. It was like a very low budget version, but it was really cool. And they use Descartes, they use Cartesian sort of philosophy to talk this computer out of. It's on the tip of my tongue. Shadow something or the other. It's not dark matter. Dark something.
Shadow is the name of an episode of Blake 7. Dark Matter is the name of a television show.
No, it's not either of those, but it's like Dark something or Shadow something. It was made in like the early 60s by college students. And they use like Cartesian philosophy to talk this computer out of self-destructing the entire ship, or blowing up the entire ship, which works for like 2 minutes and then it just blows up the entire ship anyway. It's pretty cool. I think the full thing is on YouTube, so.
I mean, it's kind of like the ending of Portal.
Spoiler.
Portal's been out for like over a decade.
Yeah,
at this
no,
point.
there's no
like
limit to spoilers. There's still a spoiler.
Well,
so I mean, it's a spoiler. Just take the word spoiler, right? It's something that spoils.
Yeah,
it can still spoil no matter when.
Yeah,
and where it occurs. So that's my take on it. But I don't care about the ending to that game. Plus, I think most people play that for like the mind-bending puzzles anyway.
At the end of it, you like part of the way you defeat GLaDOS is giving a paradox of some sort. Or there's walls all over the Aperture Science. There's signs all over the Aperture Science facility like, "Remember your paradoxes in case of rogue AI." Then lists like, "This sentence is true. The previous sentence was false," and a couple of other like really simple one-sentence paradoxes. Because the thinking is like an AI doesn't have the... What's the word I'm looking for now?
I can't believe we didn't mention AI on our last episode of Trust Your Doctor, which was Midnight.
That's a good point. But yeah, there's this idea that like they don't
Trust
have...
Your Doctor is our Doctor Who podcast, if you didn't know.
AI don't have like the sideways thinking possible to comprehend and resolve a paradox because they're like purely logical. They don't have emotional thinking, I guess. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, at least the AI that we think of today. Yeah. That we have, the only ones we have today, which is like, I don't know. There's two different types. I'm gonna get this wrong because I don't even know the difference. But there's like ground up AI and there's like top down or something like that. I don't really know what those two are. I think the only ones we have today are ground up, where like it's a computer that learns based on what you feed it, basically. Again, if it's not already obvious, I don't know too much about this.
Yeah, I don't know too much about it either.
But like a lot of the bots and just AI stuff that we have learns based on what people tell it, which is why like there are so many sort of scandalous things, right? Of like the racist like Twitter AI things, or people. I think it was a big thing for some company a couple years ago, and
because it's machine learning, which I know a little bit about because the professor I do research with does a lot of machine learning, but like a lot of AIs like that, they take the input data. And then they learn from the input data, and then they generate output data from their learned input data, and then then you have to provide feedback to the AI, telling it, whether the input data is correct or accurate or wrong, and then the machine runs the algorithm again with the knowledge, with the new data set composed of the old data set as well as the right or wrong responses to the generated data set, and then iteratively learns from that.
Right, as opposed to like Frankenstein-style artificial intelligence, where the creature wakes up and starts questioning what it is and how it got there. Right, which our AI can't do yet.
I guess it's kind of the difference between.
I mean, that's what the singularity is, right? Like when AI starts doing that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a terrifying point in time in human history to think about for a lot of reasons.
Wasn't that like didn't Stephen Hawking say that it's like the only thing he was afraid of or something like that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's this like thought experiment called Rocco's Basilisk, which is named after some forum user who posed it
What?
like a decade ago. And it's a really complicated thought experiment that would take me like a while to explain. But the gist of it comes down to the gist of the thought experiment boils down to if you value your own survival, you should help to create an artificial intelligence that's basically the singularity. And that if you don't help create it, then you're dooming yourself to death, basically.
All right. I mean, I would need to like know more about that to even say anything about it.
I mean, I could explain the entire thought experiment now, but I feel like it would be a big digression from the topic of the episode at hand.
Yeah, for sure. So.
And I feel like maybe when there's a Blake 7 episode that deals more directly with artificial intelligence,
if there is
I can
one.
bring it up again, because we do have artificial intelligence on the show in Aurak and Zen.
And they seem more in line with what we have today, right? They don't.
Right.
I mean, they have a personality. They to some extent have a personality, but
well, see, that's
it's more just like input-output type stuff.
That's actually interesting because I think Zen is more like Zen. It seems to be an artificial intelligence that's coached by the Liberator crew, right, and learns from the crew. So Zen doesn't seem like it has free will. Zen seems like he reads the Liberator's minds. He takes orders from the Liberator crew, and he doesn't question it. And he doesn't really provide feedback, whereas Aurak seems to have free will. I mean, we've seen him before directly reject orders from Blake and Avon.
Yeah, that's true, actually.
Aurak seems to basically be an artificial intelligence that has a personality and learns from himself, and that's part of the reason why Servalan wanted Aurak so much, because Aurak was the supercomputer artificial intelligence.
Sure, and in this episode later on, we actually see Aurak cooperating with Avon.
Right.
There's also that thing that they've only brought up like 2 or 3 times where the Liberator behaves like a living, organic creature. So, anyway, the course has been changed. They're now heading to a completely different asteroid.
Right. And
Villa goes off to warn them about it.
Yeah, and then they're like, "What the hell, Blake?" So
they
then
all
Blake
try and
goes
get out
crazy.
the room. They all try and get out of the room, and they see Blake locking them in at the last minute.
No, that's later. That happens later. You're forgetting the whole scene where they try like computer therapy on Blake with Aurak.
Yeah, they hook up.
Because Blake has like an attack and he's yelling like resist. I think was it resist or restore?
He passes out and he is sort of reliving his memories of when he was part of the resistance group, which is named, I think, for the first time in this episode. And unfortunately, I'm forgetting what the name is.
It's like the Freedom Path or something.
It's a Freedom Party. I'm pretty sure
Freedom
it's
Party. That's it. Just the Freedom Party, and he's saying things like restore. I think it's restore or resist.
It's a couple different things.
And Callie is
he's like I think he says guilty at some point too.
Yeah, because Callie can kind of read his mind. We kind of actually see Callie using her telepathy for once.
Yeah.
And she investigates Blake's mind. Is like, yo, he's like in distress. There's weird stuff going on. So they just hook him up to Aurak, which apparently is a thing they can do.
This is actually something I wanted to bring up because when Callie is first introduced, she can't read Blake's mind because he tricks her with that, the oldest trick in the book, like look over there or whatever, and it works on her. But then later on in Horizon, and I guess this as well, we see her sort of reading people's minds. Right in Horizon, she reads the guy's mind and says that that's how she learns he killed Roe's father.
Well, I think that's actually a continuation of character development, because in Shadow, we see her basically awaken her powers, and Gan says something, well, maybe she's just learning how to use her powers now, if you remember. Sure. Because she used the moon discs, and they empowered her to overpower the force that was trying to take over Aurak, and then Gan said, well, maybe she's just only now learning how to use them to her full potential, I guess.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, look, this isn't something that... I'm not bothered with the discrepancies like this. I know things of this nature are things that people often call out as like, it's just a discrepancy. It doesn't make sense. They introduced it and it's all off. But I'm usually not bothered by stuff like that. I just wanted to bring it up. But yeah, that's a good point, I guess.
I mean, I'm bothered if it's like a huge discrepancy like Gan was week to week. Like that bothered me.
Again, like that didn't... I'm not like too bothered by Gan.
That bothered me. This was the first episode where I actually realized that Gan was missing, because there was a scene where there was a scene when they confront Blake asking him why he changed the coordinates. He's just like, well, I'm choosing not to tell you. And they're all standing, they're all on screen at once. And I'm like, why does it feel like someone's missing? I was like, oh, it's because there's no Gan. And then Blake just marches off and Avon's like, yes, our fearless leader has decided not to tell us anything. But yeah, Blake's like, I command this ship. And Callie's like, do you? You lead us, but we don't take commands.
I think Jenna actually says that.
Jenna, you're right. It was Jenna. And
which is interesting because this is the first time in a while that Jenna has got to teleport down.
This is the first time in a while Jenna's just directly contradicted Blake, or even done anything at all, quite frankly.
Yeah, that is the sad part of it. It is the first time she's done anything in a while. Anyway, this is when Blake goes off.
Well, this is when they decide to do computer therapy.
Yeah, at first they're going to hook Callie up to the machine as well as Blake because they need, I forget why, they need some sort of counter.
Well, so they hook Aurak up to Blake first, and Aurak says, Aurak explains this whole thing in this massive plot dump, exposition dump. He's like,
which due to the nature of the show is never going to be important again, probably.
Aurak basically explains that Blake was hypnotized, and we knew
which we already knew.
Blake had those fake memories implanted during that trial in the way back.
Quote unquote fake. Someone on Twitter actually brought up, he was tried for child abuse, right? But like his relationship with Inga was years ago, and like how old is Inga now, right?
That's actually a very good point.
So how much was the Federation actually, making
Faking?
up here?
Well,
I mean, they implanted the memories in the kids, which was a messed up thing to do.
Yeah. Well, so okay, before we continue with the plot, that's interesting because there's, it was like that reminds me of like The Matrix, right? Where it was like, they created the perfect utopia and people didn't accept it, and they created the perfect dystopia and people rejected it as well. So they created a world that was basically just neither a utopia nor a dystopia.
It was basically just sort of an amalgamation of stuff,
right? That was based in reality, and basically was just like reality. My point is that if you're for someone to accept a fake memory, it's gonna be easier if you use some sort of grain or element of truth in there, and then just maybe spin it in a different direction.
Yeah, or I mean, maybe even accept like this report, right, that Blake was a child abuser when it might have, some people out there might have known that he had this relationship with his probably underage at that time cousin.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So then, the Federation, in theory, I'm not saying this is what happened, could take this report that he had a relationship with his underage cousin, and then we're like, it's not very difficult to spin that and implant this fake memory of like child molestation, right?
Right.
Anyway, he's like reverting back to his hypnotized state because of this. Something is causing, or something similar to what they used to hypnotize him is being beamed into his brain.
Yeah, Yvonne says it's when they hypnotize people, they play a tone along with the hypnotization techniques, or something like that. And then pretty soon the tone is enough to do it. Mm-hmm. They can just stop the techniques. It's like
Pavlov's bell.
It's like Pavlov's bell, or dogs. I've heard Pavlov's dogs, not bell, but
well, he used the bell with the dogs.
Yeah, or it's like the experiment with the rats who were able to push a button to get food, and pretty soon it's not that similar to that one, but yeah.
Yeah, well, if you don't know the bell dogs thing, Pavlov would ring the bell and then he would feed the dogs, and then at some point he would be able to ring the bell and then the dogs' mouths would start watering because they associated the bell with the food.
Yep.
So when they heard the bell, they automatically assumed that food was coming.
Even when it wasn't.
I read an interesting variation on that, I guess, on the rat one too. You reward the animal with food after every 5th press or something. But there's a variation where if you do it randomly, like every 1st and then like 17th or every 6th, you do it a random amount of presses and then you just stop giving them food. They'll just keep pushing the button because they just assume that the random number is so high that they just haven't reached it yet and the food is going to come eventually.
Huh. Aren't all these things like technically animal cruelty or stuff? I don't know.
Kind of. It's mental conditioning. And it happens in humans too, whether you realize it or not. Think of school. No, I'm serious. Think
mental
of
conditioning. Think of school.
Think of like elementary school. You would always hear the bell at the end of class at the start of lunch, right? And then, when you leave elementary school and you hear that bell, you'll think of lunch, or something
Well,
similar.
you still have middle school and high school. There's still a bell in most middle schools and high
Right,
schools.
but what I'm saying is,
So just when you leave school.
When you leave school and then you hear that bell again, right? You associate that with lunch or the changing of classes or whatever.
Yeah, all right. I don't even remember what my high school, middle school, elementary school bells
That's because
sounded
they
like.
changed the sound of the bell between our elementary and middle school.
Yeah. Well, it was different schools, but yeah, maybe if I heard one of those bells again, I would start getting hungry.
Try living across the road from an elementary school. You hear it every day.
Anyway, they're about to hook up Callie to the machine, but
Callie volunteers herself, but Aurak recommends Jenna.
because of a more similar
Biology.
Even though Callie is pretty similar to humans, I think, as has been established before.
Yeah, I was explaining why Aurak said they needed to hook someone else up. Aurak was like, we need someone else to be hooked up to be conscious because they'll be able to tell us when Blake's getting too close to going too deep into the hypnosis.
Sure.
During this computer therapy, which is, this reminded me of like a real life therapy technique called biofeedback, where they basically hook you up to a bunch of electrodes and show you your brain activity while they do therapy of some sort. I'm not an expert on it. I haven't read a lot about it.
What's that supposed to do, though? Like, most people aren't even going to know what they're looking at.
Well, so the point is that it's supposed to help you if you have, like, anxiety or a lot of stress, because it can show you, like...
That you're just a brain inside a head.
No, it can show you, like, instant feedback on what actually reduces anxiety, because when you're anxious, you have a lot of brain activity, and when you're not, your brain activity will go down. At least that's my understanding of it. So you can basically teach yourself these techniques to reduce your anxiety, and you can see them actually working when you can see your brain waves on the screen, right? That's the kind of theory behind it.
Sure.
I believe it's a tried and tested and proven technique. Every person's different, I think.
Anyway, they start doing this therapy session.
Computer-based therapy.
And Blake freaks out.
Yeah, Blake breaks.
Yeah.
And they have these little tranquilizer pads, which reminded me a lot of the moon discs.
Not really. It's just sort of
similar
it's just
in
a
shape.
little. Yeah, there's just a little disc that they smack on his forehead,
but it doesn't look anything like the restraining discs they used on Gan back in Breakdown, which is kind of. I was like, huh.
Yeah. Oh well.
I mean, I just brushed it aside because I was like, different season.
Yeah, it's fine. It's not a big deal.
Lose props, recreate props, or they just in universe got new ones. No, whatever. It doesn't bother me. I just thought that was kind of interesting to note. And then,
yeah, always nice when they do bring stuff back, though, like how when they brought back the gun from Shadow as Tynus's gun. Still the coolest gun on Blake 7. Really hope they bring it back again.
What a great distinction to have. They do this really dumb decision to put Blake on the bridge for some reason. Because Aurak's like, he needs 2 hours of total therapy and he'll be good to go, but we need to do it in 5-minute sessions.
Total therapy?
Yeah. Well, because we need to do it in 5-minute sessions with 1 hour gaps between sessions. So it'll take us 26 hours. And Jenna's like, oh, joy. So they decide to take Blake to the bridge for some reason. He's like knocked out, but they have him in a chair on the bridge, and everybody else goes back to the exercise room to do whatever. And then,
oh, right. This is where Blake convinces Villa that Avon and Callie are conspiring against him.
Villa just messes everything up in the story.
That's basically what he does. He convinces Villa.
Yeah, because Villa takes off the tranquilizer pad to give Blake some water. As you need to survive. And Blake's like, Avon and Callie are conspiring against me. They're trying to overthrow the ship. They've done it. They're telling you it's space fatigue, aren't they? And Villa's like, yes.
He goes, oh, you didn't know? They've been doing this for a while now. I've been onto them since the beginning.
And Villa's like, yes. Villa just goes
I kind of thought Villa was going to go to the exercise room and be like, hey guys, Blake is freaking insane, but no.
Villa goes along with this and then follows Blake and watches as Blake just traps everyone else in the exercise room.
Well,
I can't believe we saw the exercise room before the treasure room.
I can, because it's a lot easier to do a room with minimal exercise equipment than
I was going to say I can
treasure.
Because the exercise room looks exactly like the medical bay set that they used in Breakdown, for example.
Yeah, sure. Not exactly, but...
They changed the stuff inside, but the exterior walls look identical.
Yeah. Which is all right, but...
Yeah.
Whatever.
Just reuse the sets as you can.
Anyway, Blake goes back to the bridge to...
With Villa.
Yeah, doesn't...
Villa joins with Blake at this point.
Yeah, Villa joins with Blake, and Villa teleports Blake down to the asteroid. The new asteroid that Blake is sending
Can we talk about for a second
the Blake spacesuit.
Yes, because he puts it on.
It looks more similar to what you'd think of as like a spacesuit today, like a real world spacesuit, than anything we've seen on Blake 7 so far.
I mean, the helmet looks like kind of goofier because it looks like it's got like a swept back spike in the back, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, kind of. It's more of a fin. I
Yeah,
guess.
a fin. Like a shark almost. Blake beams down onto a matte painting.
Yeah, this was some sort of... Was this CSO or some type of green screen?
CSO. I will say the matte painting looked really cool, but I will also preface that with I didn't think it worked in this situation because it looked like Blake was just floating in space.
I mean, but look, maybe it was just the quality of the episode itself, but it just looked like nothing to me. I mean, I couldn't make out what it was.
I think the problem
like a red
is
landscape or something.
It was supposed to be the surface of the planet, but I think what happened was, because I was thinking about this while I was watching it, I think you can actually tell where the floor is, and I think that's why the illusion doesn't really work, because you can kind of see the division between the floor and the wall in the room that they did the CSO in, and you can. It looks like Blake's not actually standing on the surface that he's painted to be standing on. Is the problem because of the fact that you can tell where the floor and the wall ends.
Yeah, maybe if this was like a middle shot, like waist up or something, it would have worked better.
And like, it's a pity because, like I said, I think the matte painting was really good. I think it looked pretty cool.
I don't.
And I think it was kind of wasted.
Oh, well.
And then Blake kind of walks. They have the entrance to the compound, which I think looked also really cool because it was an actual like practical set with an actual floor and rocks and a door.
Yeah, I mean, pretty cool, I guess, if they actually made that, considering it was not a big part of the story.
No, this was the only time it appeared in the whole story.
Yeah. So Blake goes in.
And
Villa is, I think, giving him the okay from up on the Liberator. He's like, all right. At this point, I think Villa is a little skeptical of what's going on. We didn't mention that the Liberator is actually white in this episode.
I had always assumed it was white.
Well, I mean, to me, it looked more like the parts that usually have color, like the little red stripes around the edges and stuff like that, looked more washed out, and it just looked all white to me in this. I mean, I don't know why that was the case. Maybe it was just something with the lighting or whatever.
Probably the lighting. There was a lot of static shots of the Liberator in this story too, just kind of hovering there. They're not really hovering because it's actually like stationary. Typically, this is something you don't actually notice till they don't do it. When a ship's like just hovering or stationary in space, there'll be some very slight motion around the ship, like there'll be glowing lights or some of the stars in the background will move or something will move just so that there's some motion on the screen. And so in this, there's just no motion at all, which is why I think you notice the fact that there's nothing going on, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think 2 weeks ago, I think we mentioned how we never noticed the Liberator's orb glows. And like last week, we were like, oh, wait, it glows in the intro sequence.
It didn't really glow in the stationary shots, I feel like, which is why the stationary shots felt so like stationary and
maybe
unenergetic.
I don't know.
Like, I feel like when you don't have something going on screen, glowing or like a little space shuttle flying by or just something to show that there's life, it just feels very dead, I guess. Sure,
but like, again, I never noticed the glowing until 2 weeks ago, and didn't even notice that it glows in the intro sequence in that near the end where it sort of flies off into the distance. Whatever.
Everything's already on in the compound, and Blake's like, that's kind of weird, and then he stops communicating with Villa because he's met I was about to say Shazam. Shivan.
He's met Shivan. Shiraz Jack, no.
And the instant Shivan appeared, I thought he was like a blow-up doll because he looked really deflated on the chair.
I thought he was just a guy in a full-body cast. And that's basically what he was, but we don't know which guy in a full-body cast yet.
Yeah, so you can imagine my surprise when this blow-up doll stood up and moved over to Blake. And I was
you thought it wasn't an actual guy. You thought it was just like a doll.
Yes. I mean, okay.
I've seen screenshots of Shivan before.
When he stands up and he's actually moving around, he looks pretty good. I'll give him that, except for the googly eye. The googly eye looks...
I liked it.
Because it has a weird charm and it feels... but
I liked his costume.
The googly eye. Oh man, I really want to spoil who Siobhan is
Travis.
to say this. Okay, it's Travis. I was gonna say the googly eye makes it like Travis made this costume and Serverland as a joke was like, "Here's an eye for you," and just like plopped it on. And Travis was like, "Hey, what are you doing? I can't see what you're doing."
He should wear that googly eye over his eye patch from now on. No.
And Serverland's just like chuckling in the corner, like he doesn't even know.
Didn't even tell him it was on there. He has no idea. Kind of like he has no idea he was shot by Emmy Pack.
I forgot about the scene of Serverland just happily shooting people with Impact.
It's one of the best scenes in Blake 7 so far.
I mean, almost. The end of this story is the best.
Yeah, the end of this is one of the best lines in all of Blake 7. Not even kidding on that front.
I agree, but we're going to get there in just a second.
Because meanwhile, Villa has gone to the room where everyone else is locked in.
To free everyone else because he realized he made a big mistake.
Yeah. Luckily, he's a master lockpick and is able to get them out. Which this episode actually shows you on screen at least more than really ever before. And this episode actually acknowledges the fact that we haven't really seen many accomplishments by Blake on screen later on. But in this situation, in this scene here, they actually acknowledge or show you in some way that Villa is better at picking locks than anyone else because Avon's trying to get the lock open and he can't. And then Villa shows up and he's like, "Don't worry, I got this," and he opens it up.
Avon also apparently keeps his little pointy stick that he uses to hack everything in his pocket because he pulls it out when they're locked in that room.
Yeah, well, being Avon, I'm sure he wouldn't trust it lying around anywhere.
Not like anyone else knows how to use it.
I think so. I think other characters have used something similar at least.
Maybe. I thought Avon was just going to
correctly.
crack the lock instantly because it's like a computer-based lock and computers supposed to be his thing, but anyway.
They're all freed.
Yeah, they're freed. Jenna and Blake beam down to the planet.
I mean, Jenna and
Avon.
Yeah, Avon. It was Avon.
Beam down to the planet.
Blake is learning more about who these people are.
Yeah, there's the Attorney General who put him away for allegedly fake charges, who
Right.
apparently defected from the Federation and took all this proof that the Federation has been doing bad things with him. And then
We
Blake...
get mention of things like Servland's attempt at stealing Orak and things like that.
Yeah.
And according to this guy, he's been wanting to do this for a while. He just hasn't had the backing or the evidence to do so until now.
Yeah, and Blake correctly points out that since the Federation controls nearly most of the galaxy, who the heck he's going to take this evidence to and who's going to actually condemn the Federation. He's like, well, all these random outer planets that were ruled by governors.
They're basically planning on staging a coup, essentially.
Yeah.
And
A legal coup. Not legal as in it's allowed, but legal as in through legal channels.
right, they want Servland deposed and whoever else who's at the top deposed.
The president, I guess. And I guess Tobias Vaughn, that's not his name, but I don't remember his name on Blake 7. Counselor something.
Right. And this is a little bit later, but I'll just explain it now. One of the reasons why Blake wants to go along with them, which he explains to Avon and Jenna in a little bit, is that they've basically just been a minor thorn in the Federation's side, to bring that phrase back. And they actually acknowledge it on screen. I know it's something we've brought up where most of Blake's accomplishments have really been off screen.
I mean, Blake's biggest accomplishment is being a legend without actually doing anything.
Well,
That's
you gotta
exceptionally blunt.
You got to remember he was a legend before his brainwashing.
Right.
So I think a lot of his accomplishments were from back then.
Yeah, but also he renounced his resistance Freedom Party ways when they brainwashed him, and a lot of people believed that, and now he's become a new legend because of all the stuff he does now and allegedly does now. I feel
does off screen now.
I feel like the stories are falsified. The stories are bigger than he is, right?
Yeah, a lot of it's probably hyperbolic.
Yeah.
Especially in this episode where he acknowledges, look, we haven't really done too much that's major. And he acknowledges that, I think, in the web or episode 5 or 6 or something.
I think he also briefly mentions it in Pressure Point. When the computer's not there.
Right.
He's like, damn, we can't do anything. Anyway, Blake decides to just allow Siobhan, the Attorney General, and the chief bodyguard to beam up onto the Liberator.
Right, and Siobhan, if I remember correctly, is almost
dead.
He is almost
people
dead.
think he's
People
dead.
think he's dead, but he was a resistance leader at some point, similar to Blake.
Like a legend, like Blake.
Yeah.
They bring up an interesting thing here where Avon's like, we agreed never to let anyone into the Liberator without Aurak's permission, and Blake's like, I'm giving them permission. And I was like, that's kind of interesting because we've never had that introduced before.
Yeah, where in this, I forget how they used it in this episode, but they actually bring back Aurak's like psychic block. Do you remember that? And
Yeah.
I forget where they brought it back in.
Ah, shoot. I just watched this like 2 hours ago, too.
I think when later on, when after they bring them all up to the Liberator, they tell them to like.
It's when Avon asks if he can block the signal being transmitted that's controlling Blake, and Aurak says, I'm not allowed to do that. But if you could get me the electronics that are being used to communicate with Blake, then I can like hack them basically.
Right. So like we mentioned, they bring them back onto the Liberator.
And they set a course for this council meeting.
Right, which is
it's supposed to happen between these outer world governors, like I said.
Yeah, which is where they're going to reveal all their evidence.
Mm-hmm. It reminds me of Foundation by Isaac Asimov, which I think I've talked about on this show before.
Yep.
But in Foundation, the first human empire, which spans like the whole galaxy, in much the same way that I guess they're trying to do in this episode with the outer governors meeting, the human empire and Foundation collapses from the out in because it's a lot easier when you're far away from the capital to kind of break off and do your own thing.
Right, as we sort of saw in Horizon.
Right. So that just kind of reminded me of that. Like it was a thematic similarity, collapsing from the out in.
Sure.
Rather than, I guess the opposite would be collapsing from the in out where the government just falls apart and then the collapse spreads outward due to the collapse of the government having to take time to spread outward through the empire. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Kind of interesting to think about, I guess, that there's two mostly distinct ways in which empires can collapse.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not to say there are other ways, but those are like the two primary ways. It's on the outside in when your faraway territories start to break off and rebel, and then that kind of cascades inward towards the capital. It doesn't have to start very far away, but it doesn't start with the government collapsing. There's the inside out where like the government just falls apart, and then that kind of cascades into chaos outwards.
Could just get conquered in one fell swoop. Where's the system during all of this?
Where is the system during all this? Oh, that's right. They blew them up. So
yeah, was that the? I'm forgetting now. Was that all that was left of the of the system?
It was implied that
that was
so. It.
Yeah, I think it was.
They meet up with the governor who's like running this governor's meeting, Legrand.
And weirdly enough, Chauvin talks in what I thought was supposed to be a French accent, or like he was trying to.
Kind of.
I mean, we already spoiled that it's Travis, so like, was that
what was Travis's plan here?
No, I mean, like, what was Brian Croucher? What voice was he trying to do? It sounded vaguely French to me, like a pretty bad French accent.
Kind of. In my opinion, it was really inconsistent in tone and delivery.
Well, to me, it had like. When you tell an American to do like a stereotypical French accent, they're first of all not going to get the accent right, and they're gonna talk like this, and yeah, and that sounded kind of like his voice sounded kind of like that, basically.
Yeah, I mean it's the same if you ask someone to do like an English accent, they always do like a really posh, like, "Oh, sir, you're going to take me to the store." Like they always do like a really over-exaggerated.
Half our listeners just unsubscribe.
Don't worry, I know the feeling.
Wow. I've been watching this Australian cartoon Blinky Bill recently, and the kangaroo on that, first of all, just makes me want to cut my ears off. Second of all, sounds like they just asked an American to do the most stereotypical Australian accent he could think of.
I was going to say, you want to lose the other half of our listeners who do stereotypical American try to do an Australian accent, like, "Good day, mate."
Oh my god.
Oh, there they go.
Both of those were you. Just pointing that out, that both of those accents were
Maybe
you.
I'll just bleep them out in post.
I just did the bad French accent.
Yeah, well, you probably lost all of our French audience. Not that we had a French audience to begin with. So, Legrand is basically running this convention, like we said. So the plan is, she introduces them to this plan. She's going to introduce the Attorney General. He's going to present the evidence, and then they're going to institute Blake as the leader of this new federation that they're trying to found. And Blake just is like, wait, what?
Blake first tries to be humble about it, and because she first doesn't reveal who it is. She's like, we need a leader to guide all of us through this. And he's like, so Chauvin, right? And she's like, no.
Chauvin is dying. That's a dumb idea, Blake.
And he's like, well, then surely yourself. She's like,
And
no.
he's like, well, what about Avon? No, he doesn't say that.
It's him. It's him. At this point, I don't know if maybe this was just me, but heavy suspicion was being cast due to first of all how weird Blake was acting, and because it's also revealed, if not now, then like in a minute or two, that these were the people who were contacting Blake telepathically, or they were beaming the signal to him to get him down here. I think that's what it was.
Yeah.
And I thought heavy suspicion was being cast on them because of that, and also because of the interactions between Siobhan and what's his face, the leader guy.
Well, the heavy suspicion is also thrown on them because Callie reveals that the kind of transmitter that would send the signal was being developed on her planet Orion.
Right.
And then they never finished it, but the technology that they did develop, they sold to the Federation, which is why Avon is convinced it's a Federation trap, because the Federation bought the technology from Orion.
Right, which it is, but you find out that Legrand and whatever the other guy's name is weren't in on it, which I thought they were.
Yeah, I mean, it's supposed to be implied that they were. I mean, they kind of were, but they were misled by Siobhan, quote, Siobhan, unquote. They eventually get to this planet, but not after Avon and Callie talk to Aurak about the thing, and then they kind of confront them, and they're like, Aurak, tell him. And Aurak's like, yeah, there's some sort of thing being beamed. And so Avon's like, well, what do you say to that? They wheel Aurak into the bridge on this little trolley cart.
Well, they respond with a lie, and I don't remember exactly what they say, but Avon immediately asks Aurak if it's true, and Aurak is like, no, that's not true at all.
Oh, because they do admit that they have the transmitter.
Right.
And then the guy's like, better not tamper with it because it'll cause major damage to electronics. And then Avon's like, is that true, Aurak? And he's like, no, not true. False. Do not believe.
So here's where we see Aurak, again, I guess, sort of having a will of his own, siding with Avon for once. Actually felt pretty good to have them on the same team for once.
It's like a satisfying Avengers-style team-up between two antagonistic characters.
I mean, it's like when we mentioned this last week, how when Terry Nation writes, Avon and Blake are
kind of
best buddies. So maybe something similar to that. You know, after a few weeks of antagonism between them, it's kind of nice to see them not as antagonistic.
I mean, it's just kind of Avon. It kind of plays into Avon just using people for his own purposes, right?
Sure. And we talked about this last week as if it was like a big plot discrepancy. But one thing I was thinking of is that we also have to remember that these people are like living together in, well, close quarters, because I guess they don't make full use of the Liberator as far as we see on screen.
Right.
So they're not always going to get along with each other, nor are they always going to be antagonistic towards one another. You know, sometimes they'll get along with each other more than others.
Yeah. I mean, that's what happens
Anyone
when
who's been part of a family knows that.
You cram a bunch of people into like a small enclosed space, right? So they get to this planet, and
Big Brother,
we see
Federation.
what's probably the BBC auditorium.
Well, I really liked this because they're going back to a place that's, and I forget which planet this was, but they're going back to somewhere where the Federation is, you know, it's a central location to them. It's central. Federation is established here, and it looks more like Earth.
Right.
So that, to me, makes sense.
Yeah, no, I didn't really have a problem with it. I just thought it was really interesting. And they do this really cool thing when they're in the auditorium, too, where Servalan is this big face just on the screen and is like, we knew all about your plan all along, Legrand. You're going to put your weapons down, you submit. And then Servalan looks to the right, and then there's just a shot of like lights coming on these guards standing under a spotlight. And then she looks to her left, and there's another shot of guards just standing under a spotlight. And I thought it was really cool and like well executed.
Yeah.
The Attorney General, I guess, deciding that he doesn't want to live in this Federation, considering he was the Attorney General, he knows what they do to people who betray the Federation, decides to make a run for it and gets killed. Well,
right,
no, he doesn't get killed yet. He gets shot, but he doesn't die. Legrand dies. But he makes it out to where Blake is waiting outside to get introduced with Jenna, and Avon's sitting in like the antechamber where they beamed in. Sorry, Villa's sitting in the antechamber. Avon's on the ship with Siobhan and Callie.
Yeah, I don't remember this scene very well, but yeah,
so what happens is, this is kind of complicated. So Legrand left her bodyguard on the ship with Siobhan to wait on Siobhan, and he comes stumbling into the bridge with a knife in his back, and he's like, remember. And then Siobhan walks in and just rips his head off, and it's Travis. And Avon's like, well, I don't know why I'm surprised, but I'm surprised.
You said you saw this coming. I didn't see it coming at all.
I saw it coming.
What
I saw it coming from when Serverland showed up, honestly.
I didn't. I was pretty shocked.
Because when Serverland showed up, she like made reference to Siobhan, and Legrand was like, oh, he's alive. And at that moment, I was like, okay, Serverland knows something that we don't know. And it's probably Travis.
I don't remember. Why would Legrand say that, oh, he's alive? Because she knows Siobhan's alive.
Yeah, but Legrand was trying to play it off like she didn't know to Serverland. Yeah,
I see.
But Serverland bringing up Siobhan, to me, was like, oh, Serverland knows something that we don't know.
All right, yeah. I guess I just didn't put two and two together. But yeah, I was pretty surprised, which I guess worked out in the end.
So he comes stumbling in, and he commands Avon to beam him down to the planet. Travis kind of doesn't really think this through, if I'm going to be honest.
He's still pretty unhinged. Unlimited Travis.
He could really just make off with the Liberator right now. Blake will be dead because there's guards down on the planet. Blake has no escape, but Travis is so obsessed with killing Blake himself that he asks Avon to beam him down, and he does. And in the process, they beam Villa back up, but Blake is having another attack, so he takes off his bracelet. And Jenna takes hers off, too, to make sure she doesn't beam out before she can get Blake out.
Right, but that's when Travis shows up, and he's about to kill Blake, so it's this really tense moment where they need to get their bracelets on ASAP and get Blake back on the Liberator.
So then Avon, there's this funny scene where Villa's like, do something, Avon, and Avon just grabs the transponder and slams it on the table, and it explodes. And then Blake's just like...
Forgot about that.
Blake's just like, wow. I can think again. And they just slap their bracelets on and beam out.
Right before Travis shoots.
Yeah, they get a little bit of time because the Attorney General attacks Travis when he finds out that he's not Siobhan. And basically, that distraction gives them enough time to get their bracelet on and beam out, because then Travis just shoots the Attorney General, and then he goes to shoot them, and they've already beamed out.
And then this episode ends. The episode ends with Blake showing up on the Liberator and saying, have we made it to Del 10 yet? Get on that, guys. And just walks away.
Yeah, he's like, actually, Avon's like, can you just say thank you? And Blake's like, what happened? And he just walks off. He's like, get us to Del 10. And then Avon says the best line of the whole show. He says, I'm sorry to inform you that he is indeed himself, or something like that. Actually, hang on. I'll get you the actual line. Right, the
wiki has it.
The wiki has the line.
And I actually found a site that has transcribed basically all of the snarky lines mostly from Avon, but from anyone. So nice. I'll link that in the show notes.
I'm sorry to have to inform you that he is himself, all right. And then it ends.
Which is
a really funny line.
Yeah, it was. I really liked that ending.
It really perfectly encapsulates Avon and Blake's relationship, in my opinion. Avon cares about Blake, but at the same time, they have this headbutting rivalry of sorts.
Look at it this way. Blake makes out that he really cares about everyone and the Federation's crimes and stuff like that. Avon makes it out that he doesn't care about anything really but himself, but really that seems to be either reversing or a facade or already reversed, which is interesting.
There definitely especially is a reversal of sorts.
Both how the show ends and what's coming up in the next two seasons.
I mean,
which I guess
that might be why when I read that one review before we started the show, I was like, oh, it's better to know how the show ends when you watch the show. But I was going to say I was thinking about this in this episode, there's a parallel between Travis and Blake, which I think is 100% intentional on Chris Boucher and Terry Nation's part, where as Travis has become more unhinged, Blake has actually become more unhinged as well. That they've in tandem become more and more unhinged and more what's the word I'm looking for? They have blinders on. That they only see their goal. Yeah, single-minded. Travis just wants to kill Blake, and Blake just wants to stop the Federation. And the more episodes go on, the more these two characters get driven towards the goal and forget everything else, basically.
Yeah, I think there is mention of Star One in this episode. I don't remember where it's brought up.
It's right at the end when Blake's like, we got to find Star One too. Let's get on that, guys.
Right. As soon as he snaps out of the hypnosis, right, that's what he brings up.
And there's also, I wanted to bring this up because I thought it was really clever. Well, I thought it was at least good attention to detail. When Travis rips off the mask, he has like a beard. And I was like, that makes sense because he's been wearing this mask for like 3 months and he hasn't been able to shave. He should have a beard.
I didn't notice that, but yeah, sure.
I mean, I just thought it was like a nice attention to detail and shows that they actually care about things on this show.
Yeah.
I know it's.
Yeah, I mean,
I know it sounds like we make it out like other people on the show didn't actually care, but I think we know that they care and we know that they're doing the best with the budget that they have, and I think it's like really good attention to detail that Travis has a beard here, which I don't know if like Brian Croucher actually grew out a beard for this. I assume because of the compressed schedule he didn't, and that it's a fake. And if it is a fake, it looks really good. Like you can't tell.
Or I don't know the airing order for this season. I don't know when this
Was produced.
It might have been this. I'm pretty sure this wasn't first.
Yeah, they might have produced it. What you're saying is they might have produced it early on and had like Brian Croucher grow a beard before he started, and then you can shave it off. Maybe. I mean, I don't know. Like I said, I don't know if it was real or not, but if it's not real, it looks really good. Like you can't tell.
Yeah.
All right. So I think this week, Keon's been going first a lot, so I think I'll go first in the rankings.
Yeah, why not?
Thank you for letting me go first for once, Keon. I know you like to dominate this section. So my ranking for this week is Siobhan's googly eye. Let me explain, though, because that sounds like a really bad ranking at first, because I know I kind of bashed the googly eye earlier a little bit. But I bash it because I love it. You see, it's like silly in all the right ways, but at the same time, it's like it's the perfect capstone to the costume. And that's kind of this episode, is that it's got a lot going on, like a lot. And you can get easily lost in the overall grand scheme of things, in the overall minutia, like the googly eye. You can get lost in the minutia of the googly eye existing, or you can look at it as a whole and look at everything that went on in this episode. And I think this episode did it really well. There was a lot going on in this episode, and it didn't get bogged down. It didn't get like confusing or convoluted. It didn't feel like they rushed from place to place. I think all of that was really well done. So
Sure.
kind of like how the googly eye, like I said, you can get bogged down in the fact that it's a googly eye, or you can look at the googly eye in the context of the whole costume and be like, oh, it makes sense. He needs to have like an eye of some sort there, right? And the googly eye fits perfectly with the costume.
Yeah. All right. Well,
I think you can tell these rankings are getting more and more abstract the longer this season has gone on.
Right. We're doing a new thing next season.
Right.
We're planning on doing a new thing for every season. And I have a couple things in mind already. But anyway, my rating for this episode was the finale of Blake 7. Because it was a surprise. I was surprised about Travis. I was surprised about Siobhan being Travis. I was surprised about Jenna actually
doing things. And
Orak. Look, actually, Jenna didn't really do much in this episode when it comes down to it. But she wasn't just manning the teleport.
Jenna and Orak. This is a really meta ranking you're going for here. Because it's dependent on the fact that you know how the show ends.
Yeah.
Like, this ranking will make a lot more sense to some people if they've, at the end of our podcast, and they come back.
I'm pretty sure nobody's listening to this who hasn't watched Blake 7 already.
I mean, we don't know.
No, we don't know.
We got an email this week. Before we forget, we're coming to the end of the episode here, and that actually reminded me, because we were talking about, we don't know. We got another email this week. But before we get into that, is there anything else we want to say about this episode?
I think I'm done.
I think really I'm done too. I liked it quite a bit. It's not my favorite of the season, but I think it really executed on a lot of stuff really well. No,
but again, like pretty much all Blake 7 episodes except like Orak and Redemption, it's just really solid.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I agree. This email arrived before the last episode went out, but
due to timing stuff, we weren't able to do it. That's what I'm guessing you're about to say.
We weren't able to record this response for that episode. Thankfully, this email is pretty overall. It's kind of more general and not about a specific episode. So I think it works out okay that we put it in this episode. So I will go ahead and read it. It's from Al Bingham, who, if you will remember, has emailed us before about 2 months ago. I don't remember exactly what I don't remember what episode her email appeared on, as we're going to get to in a second. Hiya, Zenith Crew. Still really enjoying the podcast. Always happy when I see the latest episode is ready to listen to. Thank you. That means a lot. Just so you know, I am actually female. I thought you might pick that up by me saying that I was more of a Callie than a Servalan.
I didn't.
I did not. Guilty as charged. But thank you for clarifying that. Now I feel really bad. Some notes about Callie, because I think you've missed something important about her. When you were talking about her loneliness and shadow, you said that the series hadn't really touched on that before. It had, but in a really subtle way. When Callie and Blake woke up on the ship in Mission to Destiny, Blake heard Callie telepathically say the word alone. In a moment when she was recovering from unconsciousness and her thoughts were probably at their most vulnerable, we got an insight into her most prevalent ideas. She had been feeling alone, as though she can communicate telepathically with others, they can't do the same with her. After living on Orion, where others could speak to you in your mind at any time, the isolation and loneliness feels overwhelming. Callie is truly alone. Thus, when she feels something that can communicate with her mind and shadow, she finally feels truly connected to something else once again. A little note on Gambit. Jan Chappelle and Sally Nivette both loved their scene in Gambit where they got to fight in the bar. The scene was largely ad-libbed, and they originally went on for so long with it that the director had to tell them to make it shorter. I like that scene a lot because the girls rarely got a chance to play off each other in a scene. I don't think we've watched Gambit yet.
No, we haven't watched Gambit.
But that's something that now I'm actually really looking forward to since I read your email.
Yeah, I've read, like I mentioned before, a couple weeks ago, I read a few interviews with Sally Nivette, and she mentions that scene, so I already, I guess, spoiled it. But
I didn't know anything about it, but I'm really looking forward to it now because it sounds awesome. I've started listening to your podcast about the Sixth Doctor and Trust Your Doctor. I have a fascination with that regeneration because I see a lot in it to like where others just see things to hate. Keep up the good work. Down and safe, Augie. Okay, so on, I guess, Callie being alone is what we can respond to since that's the main bulk of this email.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably not something we picked up on.
No, I don't think...
Definitely something
we definitely didn't pick up on that because that's really, really subtle. And I think that's something that Blake 7 actually does pretty well. It makes me want to go back and rewatch a lot of the episodes when we're done with the show to see if I picked up on things like that.
I actually have rewatched a couple episodes. I did rewatch Shadow, and I did rewatch Pressure Point. And like I already mentioned before, I've watched the first 6 episodes twice. So
yeah, and I think Blake 7 is really, really clever in that aspect. It has a lot of those really subtle things, and I think those are things that like really make the show more enjoyable if you're rewatching, or even if you pick them up the first time through and you don't really know what they're leading to or what they're referencing yet, and then when you find out, I think they can be really exciting.
Right, like we mentioned with Callie in this episode, there's a little more going on than what we were probably giving the show credit for.
Right, I mean, and like you were saying, like, oh, Callie is using her telepathy a lot more, and then it's like, oh, well, in Shadow, she kind of, again, makes reference to the fact that maybe she's getting more in touch with it now. Like a lot of little throwaway lines, not throwaway, throwaway is not exactly the word I'm looking for. I mean that in the sense that like they're just lines
you wouldn't notice necessarily.
They're just single lines or a few lines that are just in there that don't contribute to the main plot of that episode, but like lead into character development or things that come up later in the season.
Well, which is really good because it like allows the show to be episodic, which is nice, but also
serialized.
Right, also serialized in some way.
Kind of a good mix of both, I think, because. I don't know. In some ways, episodic is better. In some ways, serialized is better. And I think if you can strike a good balance between them, then that really helps the show. I mean, Doctor Who, in my opinion, did it like series 1 of the reboot with the overarching Bad Wolf plotline being kind of the serialized plot of the season, but then each episode being individual standalone stories.
I've said it on Trust Your Doctor. That's a really great season. Probably my favorite season of Doctor Who. It's either that or season 17. Series 1 or season 17 is my favorite of Doctor Who.
Both of which had overarching plot lines that served as like a grand serialized plot over the whole season. Series 17 was Key to Time, right?
No, 16 was Key to Time.
17
was Douglas Adams.
17 was Douglas Adams,
which didn't
it was the randomizer season.
Yeah.
It's kind of. There was that tying plot thread, but also glad you're listening to Trust Your Doctor. I think we are similar to you in that we see a lot to like in the Sixth Doctor. I think that a lot of people outright just bash the Sixth Doctor. And I think we tried to give him a fair shot on our show. I think a lot of the times we try to differentiate what Colin Baker was trying to do with the role and what the scripts were giving him. Because I think there's definitely a difference.
Yeah. I don't remember much of my opinion on the Sixth Doctor, honestly. I know we bashed him pretty hard in Spiral Scratch, but we bashed Spiral Scratch in general pretty hard.
Spiral Scratch was like an anomaly, but I think if I remember correctly, we tried to a lot of the times point out things that Colin Baker was trying to take the role, or where he was trying to take the role, and then how the production crew was trying to take him in a different direction, and how they kind of clashed and led to a lot of things that are easy to dislike, I guess.
I've been listening to the old Doctor Who show podcast recently, and they're on the sixth. They don't do every story, but they're on the sixth Doctor's era right now, and that's where they're sort of coming from. They really like what Colin Baker is doing. They just don't like what he's being given.
Yeah. And that's why I think a lot of people like the audios, because they truly give Colin kind of free rein to take the character where he wanted to go originally.
Where arguably should have gone.
Yeah, but that's enough about Doctor Who. Thank you for your kind words about the podcast. It makes me feel really nice that you look forward to the episode every week. It's nice to have someone who looks forward to downloading our episodes every week. It doesn't just, I don't know, listen. Actually actively look forward to it.
Sure.
I don't know what I'm saying anymore. It's late. If you would like to email us and have your email read out to and responded to on air, you can email us at thedoctor@decorativevegetable.com. Questions, comments, concerns, angry rants, love letters, your thoughts on Aurak's sudden cooperation with Avon. Is it a tie-in to Avon's massive plot to overthrow Blake? Based on this episode alone, I'd say Avon is a better leader than Blake. But anyway, you can find us on Apple Podcasts. You can find us on YouTube at Decorative Vegetable. You can find us on Apple Podcasts and Google Play at Zenith, a Blake 7 podcast. Be sure to leave a rating if you like the show. Or if you don't, just tell us what you don't like so we can fix it.
Check us out on Facebook. Trust Your Doctor. Like us on Facebook. Also check us out on Twitter at TYD Podcast and follow us on Twitter. And next time we're watching Gambit. But until then, the end.